Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rawk, and you know, I'm starting to realise that intro might not be appropriate for audiences from other parts of the world, which is why I'm going to rebrand my intro to be more suitable for non-English audiences. Here's what I've got so far. First of all, this angle's nice, but this one's nicer. Konnichiwa, watashi wa Roku desu. Hola, soy Rawk. Bonjour, je m'appelle Rawk, je suis très sophistiqué. We're going to keep the intro the same here, but I look angry on all the thumbnails. Video games and localization. You can't have one without the other. The two concepts have swapped spit ever since the dawn of video games, and allows for games to reach beyond their native regions. Without localization, we wouldn't have gems such as Mario or Zelda outside of Japan, but here in the UK we'd still have Harry Potter for the PS2, fucking woo. A lot of times, localization can be an incredibly daunting task, perfectly adapting the source material for a whole new region to still perfectly get across everything that the original was intended to get across. And other times it's fucking dumb. Sometimes in the transition from one region to another, some questionable decisions are made. Whether it be minor changes that are just inconsequential enough to be confusing, or bigger things that change the image or meaning of a game. Today we're going to take a stroll down the heart-wrenchingly stupid side of life, as we take a look at some of the most questionable regional differences in video games. The most well-known case of localization lunacy is Super Mario Bros. 2. After the original side-scroller was a critical and commercial hit that saved the gaming industry as a whole, it was only natural for a sequel to be put into production. And produce a sequel they did, as Super Mario Bros. 2 was unleashed into Japan only 1 year later. Back then it was standard for a game to be released in Japan, then sent to other regions for release, so naturally, Super Mario Bros. 2 followed this process. When Nintendo of America received and subsequently played the game, they weren't happy. They ruled that the game was too difficult for the stupid fucking Americans, and deemed it unsuitable for the American audience. But Nintendo of America still needed to capitalise on the oh-so-lucrative Mario sequel market, so they turned to plagiarism. So they held a meeting and said, "Quick, find a platformer that we can barf Mario into." I guess that'll do. Doki Doki Panic, a game starring some fucking genie guys throwing turnips at a Bowser King K. Rool hybrid and marshmallows with gas masks. It's perfect! The main characters, who all had unique abilities, were Imogen, who was the all-rounder, Mama, who could jump higher but was floatier, Lena, who could outright float but stunk at running, and Papa, who was the strongest and thus could throw turnips the farthest. They looked at these characters, fucking died laughing, and crammed them into Mario characters. Mario, Luigi, Peach and Toad became the iconic lineup for this game. Weirdly enough, all of the characters retained their prior abilities, except Toad. Instead of being strong as fuck, he's fast as fuck, boy! And so Super Mario Bros. 2 Mario Madness was released to all non-Japanese regions, and then was re-released in Japan as Super Mario USA, and the Japanese version was released worldwide as the Lost Levels, so honestly, what the fuck was the point? Another fairly notorious instance of Nintendo's weird localization is Kirby. When you hear Kirby, what do you think of? Pink, cute and fun, right? America thinks f*** you. Kirby is a badass. Kirby and consistency are not two concepts that go well together. In Japan, Kirby is generally portrayed as the happy little pink puffball we know him as in the box art. But America is having absolutely none of that. They tend to go for the tried and true formula of slightly diagonal eyebrows to portray anger. It's supposed to make him look determined and triumphant, but it comes off more as, Americans won't buy this unless he looks pissed. Then over here in Europe, we get whatever the fuck we feel like. This is a topic I'll delve much deeper into later, but it's really interesting to see which box art we get in Europe. It's pretty much draw of a hat. Okay. The very first Kirby game, Kirby's Dream Land, also had some strange differences with box art, as the design of Kirby wasn't fully set in stone. Kirby's Dream Land was released on the Game Boy, which meant that Kirby was piss green in game, but this obviously wasn't the intended look for Kirby, so Nintendo put on their thinking caps. Kirby daddy Masahiro Sakurai wanted Kirby to be pink, whereas Shigeru Miyamoto wanted him to be yellow. The two fought on this until the game's release, and as a result of no solid decision being made, Kirby was white on the box art. This actually worked quite well for them, as his look on the box was indicative of his look in game. Apart from in Japan, where they said f*** Miyamoto and made Kirby the colour God intended. Box arts being different across different regions isn't something exclusive to Kirby. No. Nintendo covered all of their bases when it comes to stupid fucking shit. But in recent years, the trend seems to have almost completely died out. There is one notable exception though. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. The game has an absolutely fucking gorgeous box art that perfectly encapsulates what the game is. The focus is on the world. Link is looking out on Hyrule, away from the camera. The colours used are absolutely stunning, and they fit the tone of the game perfectly. And then in Europe, I smell fucking terrible. Come on, man. In all fairness, this is high quality box art, but in comparison to what Japan and America got, this is anemic. The focus is more on Link than the world, which is absolutely not the case in game. The colour scheme also gives more of a sense of joy and happiness, which, in all honesty, doesn't really match the vibe of the game. At the end of the day, this is a beautiful piece of art. It's just not the best box art for this game in particular. But why stop at different box arts here in Europe when we can change the name entirely? Yes, a lot of games over here have completely different names compared to America, and the why of this will never cease to confuse me. I actually discovered a lot of these whilst on the hunt for GameCube games, and it left me with an overpowering feeling of, what the fucking why? Now, what I'm about to say will be far from comprehensive, but I'd like to share some of the absolute idiocy I've discovered. Star Fox is called Starwing. That's incredibly stupid. Star Fox is the main character, the team is called Star Fox. Why? Kirby Canvas Curse to Kirby and the Power Paintbrush. This one just seems pointless, in all honesty. Both names get the point of the game across just as well as each other. It's just unnecessary. Kirby and the Rainbow Curse to Kirby and the Rainbow Paintbrush. Apparently we really fucking love paintbrushes over here. Kirby Squeak Squad to Kirby Mouse Attack. Kirby Return to Dreamland to Kirby's Adventure Wii. I fucking love Kirby today! Mario Strikers is called Mario Smash Football over here, and like, yeah, it makes sense, it's called football here and America is wrong, but the word Strikers has nothing to do with America's word for football. They're still wrong. Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix is Dancing Stage Mario Mix here. That's obviously because DDR is known as Dancing Stage over here for some fucking reason. But that name with Mario Mix after it makes me wheeze. Animal Crossing City Folk is Animal Crossing Let's Go to the City here. My only guess for that is that we don't pronounce the L as prominently as our transatlantic cousins, so it would sound like some of us were saying Animal Crossing City Folk. But come on guys, Let's Go to the City sounds more like a threat than a subtitle. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is simply Luigi's Mansion 2, both in Europe and Japan. A rare occasion where the US gets a better name than Japan. Mario and Luigi Dream Team slaps a bros on the end of the name here. That's needlessly redundant and incredibly stupid. Donkey Kong Barrel Blast is Donkey Kong Jet Race over here. Barrel Blast more strongly connotes Donkey Kong, but I actually like the Jet Race name. Sue me. Now, if you thought Localization Lunacy was exclusive to games, what are you f***ing stupid? Many a console have been infected with the plague of idiocy, particularly Nintendo's. But real quick, I'd like to do the unthinkable and talk about... not Nintendo? Ah, Sega, everybody's favourite console manufacturer, if you don't count all other console manufacturers. Weirdly enough, all of their consoles have shared names between the US and Europe, apart from one. The Sega Genesis, as the US knows it, is called the Mega Drive over here. This confused me for the longest time for whatever reason. I was so familiar with the Genesis that when I got my hands on the Mega Drive Mini, I was baffled. What the fuck is this? I actually couldn't think of a reason for this myself, so I did the unthinkable and looked it up. Apparently, the system is called the Mega Drive in all territories outside of the US. But when trying to name it that inside the US, there was a trademark dispute with Mega Drive Systems Incorporated, forcing Sega to rename the system to Genesis in the US. The company produced high-end capacity storage devices and were later either merged into or bought by Data Direct Networks in 1998. But they still owned the domain name of megadrive.com for a while after. Well, that was a whirlwind and a half. Now let's never talk about Sega again. After all, they did release... Jesus! The most notable regional changes of consoles are undoubtedly Nintendo's first two home consoles. In Japan, Nintendo released the Famicom, meaning family computer, and later released the Super Famicom. Don't make me tell you what that means. The Famicom was released worldwide as the NES, which stands for Nintendo Entertainment System, and later the Super Famicom as the SNES. Don't make me tell you what that means! The Famicom and the NES have totally different designs, and while I much prefer the NES interpretation, I've got to admit the Famicom is a beautiful looking system. The NES looks more like a generic video game system and is also 3 times the size of the Famicom. Okay. The Super Famicom and SNES also have different designs. If we're talking about the American SNES, that is. Over here in Europe, the SNES is way more akin to the Super Famicom, and that's actually quite disappointing. The designs aren't super different, but still different enough for me to have a preference. It's a shame, honestly, as I'm looking into buying an SNES, and I'm gonna have to settle for the design that I don't like as much. because region locking is fun! Speaking of region locking, one of the most interesting cases of this from Nintendo is a little GameCube gem I call Doshin the Giant. This game is humanity's favourite god simulator, where you play as the quintessential character, Doshin the Giant. This game is basically the anti-Pikmin. You're an all-powerful giant with the power to manipulate the surroundings, and the gameplay looks incredibly fun. The game released in Japan on the Nintendo 64 DD, a disc-based add-on for the console that only released in Japan, and was a critical failure. The game was later ported to the GameCube in Europe, but not the US. This is really weird to me, as the game is fully voice acted in English, and is obviously more than functional on GameCubes, so what gives? Well, apparently, Nintendo of America opted to release Q before Survival of the Fittest as opposed to Doshin, choosing only one because they weren't keen on releasing multiple very niche games, but this is not confirmed. Now let's go full circle with this bitch and talk about a game that changed regions as often as I change Joy-Con colours. They are so fun! Animal Crossing, one of the coziest gaming experiences you'll ever find. A series that started on the GameCube. Or did it? Animal Crossing as we know it is actually the second game in the franchise, and the first game was one that never left Japan. Dobutsu no Mori, or Animal Forest, was developed for the N64 DD, but was later reworked to a standard N64 cartridge after the N64 DD did the whole N64 DD thing. Animal Forest was released in Japan on the N64, and was fundamentally a watered down version of the game we got, with much more Japanese influence, such as the wishing well being more of a bell shrine. The game was localised outside of Japan as an enhanced port that we now know as Animal Crossing, and it added such things as the Able Sisters and the museum, which would go on to be staples of the series. The game was a smash hit, and Nintendo of Japan looked at it and said, "We want some of that." So the game was ported back to Japan and was an even more enhanced port. Funny how that works. Dobutsu no Mori E+, the final iteration of this game, that remained in Japan forever. The game added e-reader support, hence the E+ in the name, and it came with e-reader cards of the animals, which would later influence the amiibo cards for New Leaf. It added town decorations, which would later inspire the Public Works project system also from New Leaf. And finally, and most importantly, this game adds the ability to break down Nook's Cranny's door to see Sleepy Nook. This is amazing. He sells things for 20% more and buys things for 30% less because you're adding to his sleep deprivation. Why did this never leave Japan? Actually, while the game was never officially translated into English, there is a fan group working tirelessly to translate the entire game, and I think that's really amazing. Localization can be ludicrous, but without it, we wouldn't have a lot of what we have. Seriously. All of my games are from Japan, my shelving units are from Sweden, my TV is from China probably, I don't know. Without localization, I'd be f***ed. But I would still have Harry Potter on the PS2.